everyone, I'm Captain Logan. Welcome back to The Bunker. Today, I want to chat with you about something that I suppose I could have addressed in a Captain Logan show, but I kind of want to spend some time exploring it and just see where this thought process goes. This is a thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I have had questions before on the live show that dance around this a little bit, so you'll probably hear some familiar discourse here, but I want to spend more time kind of unpacking this some, and forgive me if this ends up coming off a little bit self-indulgent, but I'm sure some folks watching this will be able to appreciate this and it will resonate with them some, especially if you have ever made YouTube videos at all, or ever written a blog, or ever been kind of an armchair critic. Today, I want to talk about the idea of thinking analytically all the time and how that affects your experience engaging with and consuming entertainment. So I have been doing this for over a decade now, reviewing things on YouTube. I've been doing it as my career for, I don't know, 6-7 years now, maybe a little longer. It's hard to say at what point this goes from hobby to my full-time job exactly, but I did this for a couple of years more as a hobby, and then it kind of turned into what I do. And my writing career took a bit of a back seat, and this kind of became my writing career. And of course, I have written a couple of books as I've been doing the show, or excuse me, as I've been doing the channel, and as I always say, I kind of see Spawn Year as my second novel. And so I certainly have found this whole thing very fulfilling, very engaging. I love what I do. I love writing and talking about fiction as much as I love writing fiction itself. And I think that my writing prowess has improved exponentially doing this, both in working on my own fiction, but also in writing about the writing process, and in just prose in general. Like, any writing you do counts when you're trying to work on your writing craft, both nonfiction and fiction. And so I think that my fiction writing has improved because of all the rewinds I've written. One criticism I got on my new novel, the audiobook I put out recently, The Edible States of America, was that it sounds like a bunch of rewinds, and I guess that's kind of a risk that I took in writing in that format, so that is maybe something that I'll need to work on for my next book. And I'm certainly not going to write another series of fictitious journal entries that are likely to sound a lot like a rewind. I'm sure my reading that book didn't help either. But anyway, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that those two careers have kind of become one and the same for me, and I think about all of it as kind of interconnected, and that can be really nice in its way, because I think I have improved in all aspects of what I do in the last several years. But it can have some drawbacks as well, and that's mostly what I wanted to talk about here. And I don't want this to be like a rant about why it sucks being a reviewer and trying to enjoy consuming entertainment. I don't mean for this to be really negative or cynical or pessimistic, but it is an interesting phenomenon that I feel like I've kind of run into, and I want to address this, explore it, see if anybody else has ever had this. So I feel like I consume entertainment very differently from the way I did back in '09. I have always, when I started, I've always been a very analytical person. I've always liked to, think critically, and I've always thought that critical thinking is very important, that using your own brain matters, coming to your own conclusions about things. Whether we're talking about entertainment or just things in your personal life or politics or anything, it doesn't matter what it is. It's thinking critically is an important skill, and sometimes it feels like a lost art to me these days. It doesn't always feel like people understand what critical thought is or why that's important. And so I border on preaching about this all the time, that it's important I think to have kind of two brains when you're watching something or reading something. You have your subjective brain, which enjoys a thing just because you enjoy it. And as I always say, you're never the same person from day to day, so you can't always even fully articulate why you appreciate something. I like to try, certainly, when I'm discussing something that I've recently looked at with somebody else. Why did you like that? Oh, well, let me see if I can break that down. But I've always thought it's important to let a thing wash over you and then try to articulate after the fact, as opposed to reviewing a thing as you go. Meaning that if I don't have the entire piece already in front of me, I don't know what path it's going to take me on, what journey I'm going to go on with it. And so all I have is a bunch of first impressions as I'm going through a movie or a TV show or a comic series, etc. And I want to get as much of a full piece, and I realize that some of these things are serialized, and so that becomes more difficult. Sometimes you'll have, episodic things that are part of a larger narrative, and so you have maybe a full piece that is part of an even fuller piece. Forgetting that, just, looking at a thing that, stands alone as much as it can anyway. You're sitting there, you're enjoying it, or maybe you are not, but you want to do your thinking about it after the fact as much as humanly possible, or at least you're thinking about, like whether or not every aspect of it is working. For a couple of reasons. I think you can really get in your own way when you're watching a thing and you're going, okay, well now wait, that you're not supposed to do that in a movie, or that's a big mistake, and then you realize later that it either wasn't breaking the convention you thought it was, or it was doing it for a real reason, right? Where there's a rule that it broke because this was an appropriate place to do that, and you just needed to take it on its own terms and give it the benefit of the doubt and let it do its thing, and then get to the end and see if what it was doing actually works. My approach to review has always been, and a lot of you guys have probably heard me say this several times, threefold. You look at what a piece seems to be trying to do. So hopefully the piece is communicating its intentions to you in some way. Is it accomplishing what it's trying to do, or what is it trying to do in the first place? Is it accomplishing that? And was that thing worth doing in the first place? And I think that you have to sit down and have an experience with a thing and let it digest before you can fully appreciate it and understand how you feel about it. I find, and I've said this before too, that I tend to not fully understand even what I think about a thing until I have sat down and written about it, or even made a video about it, talked it out like I'm doing here. That's why I appreciated the protagonist in Stephen King's 11/22/63 so much, because that was an English teacher who that was part of his worldview, and he says the same thing real early on in that novel, that he never really knows how he feels about something until he's sat down and written about it. And so when I say two brains, what I mean is you've got the kind of animal instinct brain. Am I enjoying this? Am I not enjoying this? And then you have that critical brain, that more objective brain. I can't say fully objective, because obviously your own sensibilities and your background and your understanding of how you think things are supposed to go is not going to be the same as other people's, and your bias is always going to inform your opinion. But it's more objective in that if you have an intellectual understanding that a thing is accomplishing what it's setting out to do well, whatever aspect of the thing we're talking about, regardless of whether or not you're liking the piece, often you can separate those two things, and I think often you should separate those two things. Here is something that clearly somebody put their heart and soul into and has. And I don't mean to say that if somebody worked hard, a thing is good. That's not what I mean. Sometimes people can kill themselves for things that turn out to just be adequate or end up not really working. Art is, by its very nature, experimental. And if sometimes you'll fill in for a formula and it won't work because you've seen it a million times before and it doesn't bring anything new to the table. And sometimes you'll try something completely original and it falls apart because it just wasn't cohesive enough. It just doesn't come together at the end. And so that's unfortunate, but that's the nature of the beast. That's going to happen sometimes. And the example I always like to go to is Apocalypse Now. I don't like that movie. I don't want to watch it. I find it very depressing. It hurts my feelings. I couldn't sleep for 2 days after I first saw it. But I think it's an absolute masterpiece. I think that the people who made that movie were masters of their craft, and it works on all cylinders, and I think it's a little bit, stretched thin at the end, maybe. It maybe has some pacing issues toward the end, if I have to be, critical about anything mechanical with that movie, but it is a movie that I think is nigh perfect, and I also don't like it. And those are two very different brains. I am these days finding it very difficult to practice what I preach on this. I think it is really hard as a person who reviews so much of what I'm consuming to not always have that critical brain on. And again, I don't mean to say that you can only enjoy a thing if you turn your brain off. And I've always had a hard time with that idea, with that sentiment, turn your brain off. When I say let a thing wash over you, I don't mean to think that you shouldn't have thoughts in your head. I don't mean to say that there aren't a lot of, great movies and, great stories that don't require your brain to be firing on all cylinders when you're watching it. Of course, Dark City, Fight Club, these are things where if you do just completely turn your brain off and you're trying to enjoy it superficially, there might not be anything really there for you. There are a lot of stories that require you to be constantly trying to guess at what exactly is happening in a thing, or what things mean, to pick up, subtext, or symbolism. A lot of good stories, of course, keep you guessing and are playing with your expectations. And also, there are a lot of good stories that require a prerequisite before you get there. Stories set in particular time periods or about particular parts of the world. You may need to know something about World War II in order to appreciate a piece that's set there, or you may need to know something about the Crusades, or about feudal Japan, or about Italy to watch something that takes place in that country. Most of us had to read in high school Dante's Inferno, and Dante is really difficult to read if you don't know anything about Italian history, which of course I didn't when I first sat down and had to read that. And so I appreciated all of the imagery of hell and the some of the symbolism and subtext going on there, but a lot of it went over my head because I don't know anything about that. And so there is a certain amount of thinking that needs to be done in order to appreciate a lot of different kinds of stories. But that doesn't mean constantly being critical of it. And I also don't mean to say that if something is taking you out because it doesn't seem to be handled right, that is invalid and that you should ignore it. I don't mean that either. I like to try to give a thing the benefit of the doubt. If I paid my hard-earned money to go see a movie and I got to sit there for 2 hours, if 10 minutes in I am not engaged and I'm not enjoying it, I'm hoping that it will win me over at some point. And so I'm trying desperately not to just write the thing off because it seems to have some shoddy aspects. Okay, there's a couple actors in this movie that are not doing their best work, or maybe they were miscast, or maybe they just aren't great actors, or this movie has some special effects issues, or poorly integrated CG and stuff. A really good script can often ultimately get past some of those other aspects to a piece. And of course, you want a thing to fire on all cylinders as well as it can. I don't mean to say that the only thing that matters in a movie is the script. If that were the case, then what is the point of it being a visual medium? But you can't make a brilliant movie out of a crappy story. You can make a really adequate movie that is not real well directed and not the super well acted that has a brilliant story. That latter thing I think is possible. But I find, because I review so much of what I consume, that it's really hard not to accidentally review a thing as I'm going. I've done this for so long now that I just have my head in that headspace all the time, and it has really affected the way I enjoy entertainment. One thing that I do whenever possible now, and it makes things take longer, and I'm not always able to do it, is I try to watch everything twice if I can. I try to watch everything twice, I try to read everything twice. I've started doing this a lot more in the Comic Vault, where if I can at least give a thing a second skim, I find that my reviews are stronger because I'm coming at it with a second impression and not just a first. And that first impression is, mired by constantly thinking about what I might say in the review when I sit down and talk about it. And I kind of hate that. It drives me crazy. I feel like I just kind of get my own way. I'm not just reading a thing for fun and then talking about it later. I wish I was better at separating those two things. And I think at one time maybe I was. And I don't know if it's just the repetition of it. I don't know if it's just years and years of talking about most of what I'm looking at. Or if it's just, the kind of perfectionism in me, the desire to always improve at both off-the-cuff review and sitting down and writing a thing. I want my off-the-cuff reviews to sound as written as humanly possible, and sometimes I wonder why I bother just sitting down and talking off the cuff when I know that reviews would probably be more concise and wouldn't take as long, and would seem more professional if I wrote them all. But A, there's not always enough time of the day, and B, I wouldn't be able to get as many things out, and there's a lot of things I'd like to talk about. And there's a lot of stuff I know some of our viewers would like me to talk about. And the other thing, of course, is these days with so many copyright issues, I can't always put anything on the screen. Like I could, sit here with a teleprompter, if, I could get a teleprompter and read at you and put myself on screen, or I could do what I've started to have to do again with Superhero Rewind and turn it into a glorified podcast and just put, a generic picture on the screen that's there for however, long-winded my video is. And so that's some of why I do more things off the cuff now. And also I just want to get better at it. I've always been jealous of Eric for his ability to be able to sit down and talk into a microphone for 10 or 20 minutes and have all of his thoughts together and not repeat himself that often, not, stutter and stop all that much. And I know that guy has no notes with him. I realize that Eric hasn't done any off-the-cuff videos, for himself in a long time. That his channels, he's discontinued his channel and he's not making those kinds of videos anymore. But go back to anything he and I have made together, and he is, in my opinion, a little bit more articulate than I am. Maybe a lot more. He just seems to always have this focus and his thoughts together in a way that I don't, and I've always respected that, and I've always wanted to get better at that. And I want to think, like I said earlier, that I have gotten better about this over the years, just, working at it and repetition, sitting down and doing it more and more. But because I'm constantly talking about the kinds of things that I look at just for fun, it's really difficult to just read a thing and not be thinking, committing things to memory and going like, I want to make sure I talk about this later, and I want to make sure I talk about this later. And I think there's a pressure that there didn't used to be when I first started, where I just kind of perfectionism. Like, I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. That is part of what comments are for. I don't mind not always getting everything 100% right, and yet it slows down my reading because I don't want to miss anything. I think years and years of getting comments, like, I think it's just a subconscious thing, right? Like, I do this as much to educate myself as I do to express my opinions about things, and maybe sometimes even educate other people about things that I've looked at that maybe they haven't taken a look at, either to recommend things to them or so that they'll know a story that they may not have time to read. Particularly on the Vault, I like to do that. But years and years of people going, oh, Cap, that's not quite right, or you missed this plot point, and it can certainly be really aggravating when it's like, well, this review would have gone in a very different direction if it weren't for that one plot point that I totally missed. That's not a problem. It's not bad. I know that I'm not being lazy and that I'm doing my best and I'm paying as much attention as I can, and I'm soaking it all up. Sometimes if I miss a plot point or a detail about something, it actually tells you something about the piece. Maybe it wasn't made explicit enough in the thing, or maybe it didn't have my attention in that particular part of it well enough so that I would remember it. And if I were to, sit down with the author and give them constructive criticism, I might say, you need to make this more explicit, or here's why I wasn't engaged in this section. It's like, it's an educational experience for everybody. When somebody is doing fine-tooth comb, in-depth review of things, because some of it is the experience of. Was that not just like, I'm an expert on this now, I know everything there is to know about it, and I'm taking a test on it now and proving to you that I know everything that's in this. If you ask me a trivia question, I can tell you exactly what page and panel that thing was on. That's not my job. That's not really what it's about. It's a lot more like, I like to go in depth and I like to discuss nuances and ins and outs of a thing, and a lot of that is because it's in those finer details that we often can tell whether or not a thing seems to be working, seems to be accomplishing what it's after. And so I can, go much more broad and do like a quick 4 or 5 minute review. Here's what worked, here's what didn't, and then I'm out. But I like to give examples. I like to get a little bit deeper and say, and I don't mean necessarily like super philosophically deep, like, look how insightful I am. I just mean, here's, and, just kind of the writing teacher in me, right? Here's an example of why I made this broader point where this author is really excelling at something, or here's where it really needs a lot of work. And so it just takes time to talk about a thing like that. And what I find myself doing now is thinking about all of that on a first read. So like I said, it slows me way down when I'm looking at something, and it makes the whole job of, or I shouldn't even say job, it makes the experience of entertainment, of just, soaking something in, trying to enjoy something, feel more like work. And it can be a little exhausting. And I don't mean to be all woe is me, I have to read, the comics and I have to watch movies for a living. Look how much my life sucks. Again, I love what I do. It's so neat that I'm able to do that. And it's even neater, it's even a bigger deal that anybody has ever cared about anything I have to say about anything. I feel like the luckiest person in the world sometimes that this is what I get to do, and that it has remained as viable as it has for me. But it just kind of messes with my thought process a little bit. It is exhausting sometimes to just sit down and try to read something even for fun anymore, because I have a hard time putting my critical brain aside. I have a hard time not reviewing a thing in my head while I'm looking at it, and it makes it take longer to look at stuff for review, because again, I don't want to miss anything. So my solution to that, like I said, lately has been try to look at things twice when you can. And sometimes I just read and watch things that are so lengthy, I just don't have time to do that. I remember back in the days of Arrow discussions, when Eric and I started that show, they were always better discussions if we could watch the episode twice. And we would even get comments from people that would be like, you guys missed a lot of stuff, or you didn't appreciate this as much as you probably would have if you looked at it again. And that is not true of everything. Obviously, because there's lowering of standards that can happen with a thing too, where you look at something and it wasn't what you expected it to be, and so you disliked it a lot more than you do on a second viewing, because now you're able, now you know what you're getting yourself into. And sometimes that's an adjustment that you have to make, and it makes sense. And sometimes it does feel like lowering standards, where it's like, okay, well, now that I know that this isn't all that great, I'm able to enjoy it a lot more than when I thought I was going to go into something, fantastic. But I want to get myself back to a place where I can just kind of relax when I look at stuff. Like, consuming entertainment, reading stories is not relaxing for me anymore like it used to be. I don't mean to say that I don't still enjoy it, it's just always, and that it's always a chore, it's just always an intellectual exercise now. And I wish that I could have that separation where the intellectual exercise more or less happens after the fact, where I can, even something that's real heady, where I can just take a thing in and not feel self-conscious about it. Because I do this where I'll read a thing and sometimes I feel like I'm missing stuff. And I'll go, okay, I don't know if I'm not understanding this plot point or a character motivation because I haven't gotten to it yet and I'm not supposed to know it yet, or if I missed something. And it just makes me take forever to read stuff now. I guess I'm solving this problem for myself when I say look at everything twice, but like I said, I just don't always have the time to do that. And I wish I could just, relax more when I look at stuff. And I'm curious to know if anybody else has this problem as well. And because, again, I feel a little hypocritical. I'm always giving the advice of let a thing wash over you. It's not important that you can articulate your feelings about a thing while you are feeling them. And what good storytelling is supposed to do, after all, is to make you escape into it. I know some people don't like it when I talk about escapist entertainment because some people, I think, have this notion that when I say escapist, I mean that stories that, like, fun stories are supposed to not be about anything, or that I'm saying that it's bad if stories are ever about anything real world or ever about, like, politics or things happening right now. That's not what I mean when I say that. I'm just saying that you want to lose yourself in a piece when characters come alive and they feel real to you and they matter to you, and like the sweet spot when you're watching a movie should be that you forget you're watching a movie. That it's like you're experiencing reality along with these characters. And when that's why I talk so much about technical stuff that'll take you out, where you'll and in technical writing stuff too, like exposition and dialogue, things where you can see the script in it, or badly integrated CGI, or poor choices for musical stings, bad camera placement and composition, etc., etc. Because those are the things that remind you that, oh yeah, there's a production here. And that's the other thing too, is I find myself thinking so much about the production side when I look at things now, because that's stuff that I have to talk about later, when I would A, enjoy things more, and B, probably be able to discuss a more pure experience with a thing if only I wasn't, I didn't have that aspect of it in my head. I guess what I'm saying is I wish that I could come at narrative more like a child as I'm looking at it, where I can get sucked into it and kind of forget that it's a thing somebody made and just live in another world for a couple of hours and then come out of it and then think about it and then process it and then decide if I even liked it or not. And that's not to say that it's bad if you're looking at a thing and 10 minutes in you go, I don't know if I like this. Like, yes, of course, but that's animal instinct. That's your brain like doing work without you having to force it. And it's like the forcing comes automatically to me these days, if that makes any sense, where that critical analytical thought process is the first thing I'm doing and not the second. And I don't like it. I've been trying to work on that, and I find it kind of difficult. It makes me avoid looking at things for fun. The way I have been relaxing lately, when I just need to take a load off, is by new hobbies that I never thought I would care about. I've been painting miniatures lately and getting into tabletop board gaming, with the Power Rangers miniatures game. These are a couple things I never used to really care that much about, particularly painting. I don't think I'm great at it yet. I don't even think I'm good at it yet, but it's been really relaxing. I'm really enjoying it. And I am finding when I'm doing that, I can put something on in the background and I'm not, constantly reviewing it in my head like I have been with other things, because it's, I have a hard time even putting things on in the background anymore. I want like 100% focus on it, and that has allowed me to kind of do that again. But anyway, as I said, I am curious to know if any of you guys have ever kind of had this problem, particularly if you've ever done any reviewing or any blogging. I just thought I'd let you into my thought process a little bit and tell you what's been kind of going on with me when it comes to just trying to sit down and enjoy something, because so much of what I do is for work. I have gotten to the point where I am not reviewing every single thing that I'm consuming, and I think that is helping. I think reviewing became almost like an addiction for me at some point. And again, I love doing it. It's still a lot of fun, and I don't really enjoy watching things and never discussing them. That's like half the fun for me. Certainly, but it's a discussion that should come afterwards. So anyway, leave your comments, let me know what you think about all of this, and I will see you again real shortly with another episode of the Captain Logan Show, live tomorrow night at 7 Central. And in the meantime, I was Captain Logan. I'll see you next time.